There's a few things I've learned over the course of my life. Few things I've realised I do pretty well, and one of them that I've noticed that I do particularly well is recognise mistakes that other people make, and I'm particularly good at calling them out as well. If you're anything like me, it's probably a skill you've picked up relatively early on as well. If it's not, probably you'll hone over the course of your life. Most of us are pretty good at that. I think if you haven't been living under a rock, you'll know that there is opportunities pretty much come up against us every single day to recognise mistakes that other people make and to judge them for those mistakes, maybe even seek sort of retribution or punishment. But the way in which we go about doing that can have a massive impact on our life and also on theirs, but importantly on our life. And if you're looking for them, you'll see people making mistakes all around you all the time. If you're sort of young and still living at a home, you probably see your parents making a lot of mistakes. Stupid decisions, poor parenting, just getting in your way, getting up in your grill. Like, parents are always, making mistakes. Your friends probably from time to time will do something to annoy you or betray you or leave you out or something. You're a bit older, maybe you're dating someone or you're married, your partner, you get a good chance to see the mistakes they make, and they can be really quite confronting. Maybe you're in this church, your pastors, they make mistakes, and it's pretty easy to spot them sometimes, and it gets sort of frustrating. Maybe your political leaders, or the business kind of world or whatever. You'll see in your community and leaders in the community often making mistakes and doing things wrong. And I think it's our instinct as humans to react and judge harshly and to seek retribution and to want to get back at them and to make them pay for something. It's not always the way, but as human beings, that's often sort of where it goes. This is a photo of someone being stoned, which is a pretty horrible thing. But it's not something that just happened back in the Bible days. This photo was taken in Afghanistan last year. And what they do is they bury someone up to about their chest, and then people gather around them with rocks that look a bit like that, and they just hurl rocks at this person until they die. It's a brutal, savage kind of experience, and it was quite a common way of killing people back in Bible days. And I want to tell you a story, or talk about a story tonight that you're probably all familiar with. There's a couple of things about this story that I just want to make the point. I guess some elements of the story are not relevant to what we're talking about tonight. One of those things is the actual sin that occurs in the story. It's actually of no real relevance to what we're talking about tonight. Neither is the gender of the people involved. And also the fact that it occurred 2,000 years ago actually is a bit irrelevant. It's as current today as it was back then. So the story, which most of you probably know, is where a group of people catch out a couple in the act of adultery, and they drag the woman, in this case, before Jesus. And they're sort of asking his advice about what should happen to this poor woman. They're trying to catch Jesus out. They're being a bit tricky. They want to sort of show him up as looking a bit soft. But anyway, they say to him, this woman has just been caught breaking the law. The law says we should stone her. We should hurl rocks like this at her and she's dead, until she's dead. What do you say, Jesus? And he goes on to give a great answer. But just to stop it there, in that story, we are not the woman. We are the men in that story, often in our lives. And we're the ones holding the rocks, and we're making a decision about whether we want to exact retribution and revenge and throw those rocks. Maybe not literally, but you know what I mean. Get back. Jesus gave this answer that has kind of echoed throughout history. Even in the secular world, it's famous because it's so kind of good. His reaction to them is, he says, yeah, sure, she broke the law. All right, you guys stone her. The person who has never sinned amongst you, you should be the one to throw the first rock. And there's kind of a silence. And then one by one, they all just kind of slink out the room. None of them are game to actually do it because they recognise that they've also sinned. Maybe not that exact sin, but they've made mistakes before as well, and they're totally unqualified to throw the first rock. And Jesus is also calling us, when we recognise other people making mistakes or falling short, to have the same sort of self-reflection, I guess. He's calling us, as he was calling them, to a kind of to a forgiveness and like a mercy. The critical element is that those guys, sure, they could go ahead and stone her, but only if they were in the category of someone who had never sinned themselves. In the same way, Jesus is teaching us that, yeah, we can go ahead and throw stones at someone else for the mistakes they make, but only if you're in the category of someone who has never stuffed up yourself. And in the same way, the Pharisees recognised that they were not qualified to and all left the room. We also pretty much, most of the time, we need to recognise that we are also totally unqualified to be hurling rocks at people and leave the room. There's another lesson from Jesus which is similar, it's related. It's about the guy with the beam in his eye who's trying really hard to get the speck of wood out of his brother's eye. And Jesus is, again, quite brutally honest to him. And he says, you're a hypocrite. Like, you can imagine the situation, right? Like, if you've this dude walking around with a plank in his eye, and he's not worried about that, but he's worried about his mate who's got a splinter in his eye. That's just absurd. Like, if you get something in your eye, a splinter of some sort or whatever, you know that your whole world suddenly is about what's in your eye. You'll do everything you can to get it out. Your world narrows to that. Your mate who's got a sore foot over there, you don't care about that. And Jesus is kind of saying the same thing, like, we've got to recognise that most days we've got a plank in our own eye. And let's focus on that before we have a look at the dude next to us who's got a splinter in his. I think the gold thing about this story is that Jesus is teaching us that if it's left unchecked, the human desire for revenge and retribution and justice and punishment, he's sort of saying, what kind of world are you going to end up living in if that's your first thing you run to every time? Because it's very easy to be the victim, especially in society today. The shrillest, most hysterical voice kind of gets the attention. But if you're obsessed with demanding justice for every perceived wrong that happens in your life, and you want punishment on everyone who makes a mistake in your life, your world will actually become very small and very miserable. And so the key to avoiding ending up in that small and miserable world is that honest self-reflection that Jesus is talking about. Have I made a mistake before? Have I fallen short before? And the answer should be yes. And then, well, what gives me the right to kind of, although it gives me some fleeting satisfaction to metaphorically hurl a stone at someone, really what gives me the right to throw it? He's kind of teaching us to think, what kind of world do I want to live in? Like, what kind of friendships do I want to have? Do I want a friendship group that's full of, the second someone makes a mistake, they get slammed for it? Or do I want a friendship group where mercy and forgiveness are the feature of that relationship? Like, what sort of marriage do I want to have? What sort of family do I want to be a part of? What sort of church do I want to be involved in? Even my community, what sort of community do I want to be involved in? And I think that teaching is that before next time you're about to hurl a rock, you stop, put the rocks down, just take a step back, take a breath and think, look at myself. Thanks.